Americans will head to the polls in November 2024 to elect the next U.S. president. The person sitting in the White House's Oval Office has a big influence on people's lives both at home and abroad, so the outcome of this election matters for everyone. The U.S. political system today is dominated by just two parties, so every president in modern times has belonged to one of them. The Democrats are the liberal political party, with an agenda defined largely by its push for civil rights, a broad social safety net and measures to address climate change. It is the party of incumbent President Joe Biden, who is trying to secure a second term in power. The Republicans are the conservative political party in the U.S. Also known as the GOP, or the Grand Old Party, it has stood for lower taxes, shrinking the size of the government, gun rights, and tighter restrictions on immigration and abortion. Former President Donald Trump is the last Republican left in the race and has secured enough support to be nominated the Republican candidate. The nominations will be made official at party conventions this summer. When is the next U.S. presidential election? The 2024 election will be on Tuesday, November 5, 2024. The winner will serve a term of 4 years in the White House starting in January 2025. Who are the candidates and how are they nominated? The 2024 presidential campaign is well underway. It started with 15 candidates, 9 Republicans, 4 Democrats, and 2 independents, although nearly all have already dropped out of the race. The two main parties nominate a presidential candidate by holding a series of state primaries and caucuses. There are differences between the parties and the process varies from one state to another. One of the biggest polling days is known as Super Tuesday, named because more than a dozen states all held their primary contests on Tuesday, March 5. President Biden announced his re-election bid earlier this year and has won enough support to secure the Democratic Party nomination despite some long-shot challenges. In the Republican Party, former President Donald Trump saw off his last remaining challenger, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, and has won enough primary contests to propel him over the finish line to be nominated the Republican candidate. There are also some independent candidates running for president, including Robert F. Kennedy Jr., nephew to former President John F. Kennedy. How does the U.S. presidential election work? Both candidates compete to win Electoral College votes. Each state has a certain number of Electoral College votes partly based on its population, and there are a total of 538 up for grabs, so the winner is the candidate that wins 270 or more. This means voters decide state-level contests rather than the national one, which is why it's possible for a candidate to win the most votes nationally like Hillary Clinton did in 2016 but still be defeated by the Electoral College. All but 2 states have a winner-takes-all rule, so whichever candidate wins the highest number of votes is awarded all of the state's Electoral College votes. Most states lean heavily towards one party or the other, so the focus is usually on a dozen or so states where either of them could win. These are known as the battleground states. Who else is being elected? All of the attention will be on who wins the presidency, but voters will also be choosing new members of Congress, the government's legislature, when they fill in their ballots. All 435 seats in the House of Representatives are up for election, while 33 Senate seats are also up for grabs. Republicans control the House and Democrats are in charge of the Senate. These two chambers pass legislation so can act as a check on White House plans if the controlling party in either chamber disagrees with the president. Who can vote? If you're a U.S. citizen and you're 18 or over, you should be eligible to vote in the presidential election, which takes place every 4 years. When do we know who has won the election? Usually a winner is declared on the night of the election, but in 2020 it took a few days to count all the votes. The period after the election is known as the transition if there is a change of president. It's a time for the new administration, including cabinet ministers, to form and make plans for the new term. The president is officially sworn into office in January in a ceremony known as the inauguration, held on the steps of the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. Joe Biden v. Donald Trump, where contest will be won and lost. The Republican primary race is not officially over, but with no obvious pathway to victory for Nikki Haley, a general election showdown between two adversaries is coming into view. We are months away from the Democratic and Republican conventions, the moment when each party officially unveils its presidential nominee. But the 2024 election seems all but set in stone. The contest between Joe Biden and Donald Trump will be unique in modern history as a rematch between the current president and his immediate predecessor. Having two presidents running changes the nature of the race, says Todd Belt, a politics professor at George Washington University. This is a comparison, not just a referendum on the incumbent. There are no blank slates going into this election. The contrast will be simple, according to Sean Spicer, who served as Mr. Trump's first press secretary and worked for the Republican National Committee prior to that. For those people who say, well, during Trump, the policies of Donald Trump made my life better, more secure, made the economy and our communities better, it's a no-brainer. The Trump campaign has every motivation to go on the attack against Mr. Biden, in part to distract from his own weaknesses, including his legal troubles, his divisive rhetoric, and his attempts to undermine the 2020 election results, which contributed to the January 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. But Mr. Biden also has key vulnerabilities, struggling to sell his first-term achievements and trying to convince the public he has the energy for the campaign and a second term. Already in this presidential race, he is painting his predecessor as out of control and a threat to America, and to democracy itself. Usually, that's what you do when you're running against somebody who's unknown in politics, says Susan Estrich, a Democratic author and analyst who managed Michael Dukakis' presidential campaign in 1988. But here, you've got somebody who's very well known, and you're just trying to prove he's a big risk. It's a rematch few Americans say they want, a bare-knuckle, nasty slog of a campaign, but it's a presidential choice that at this point they seem almost certain to get. Mr. Biden's approval ratings continue to languish in dangerous territory for an incumbent entering an election year. Public perceptions of Mr. Trump are also negative, however. By all indications, November's general election is going to be tight. National polls show the two candidates either neck and neck or Mr. Trump with a slight advantage. But this early in the race they are of limited usefulness, given the nature of the U.S. political map. While Americans will head to the polls across the nation, this race will once again be decided in only a handful of states. That's because the Electoral College, the system the U.S. has to pick its president, depends on candidates winning each state, and most states are solidly Democratic or Republican. The most crucial states that could go either way this year include Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan in the so-called Rust Belt, and Arizona and Georgia, two states that Mr. Biden flipped Democratic in 2020. Nevada is also considered a toss-up, but its small population makes it a less valuable prize. A few states that have been battlegrounds in previous election cycles have slipped off this map. Florida and North Carolina have trended Republican of late, while Virginia and Colorado appear to be more solidly Democratic. So while national polls provide fodder for political commentators, a much smaller subset of voters will ultimately be the ones who matter. Polling in November that showed Mr. Trump inching ahead in these key states caused alarm among some Democrats, but polls a year from the election are not necessarily accurate predictors of the outcome. Abortion or immigration? The Biden campaign will try to convince voters that Mr. Trump is responsible for abortion becoming illegal or greatly curtailed in dozens of states, even as the former president has tried to moderate his position on the issue. Ever since the U.S. Supreme Court, with the help of 3 Trump-appointed justices, discarded a 50-year precedent giving the right to abortion constitutional protections, Democrats have been riding a groundswell of support on the issue to post better-than-expected results at the ballot box. Mr. Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris recently held a campaign event in Northern Virginia focused narrowly on this one issue. Abortion has turned out to be a much more powerful issue than a lot of people thought it would be, Ms. Estrich says. Everywhere it's been on the ballot, the pro-choice position has won. If abortion is the electoral issue the Democrats will be trying to elevate in the minds of voters, Mr. Trump and the conservatives will be doing the same for immigration.